All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first 2021 edition, first ever 2021 edition of College with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson. Plus, this week's special guest, Mike Miller, the owner of Delilah's, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Real quick, before we get started, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. Just want to show you a few different ways you can interact with your hosts and their guests throughout the live stream today. So on your right, you'll see a chat window. Feel free to say hello. I already see several people in there, at least one person, Jeff Platt, saying Miller rules already. So that's a good start. There's also a question box at the bottom of the screen. There's a little button that says ask a question. So if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, just enter them in there. I'll be keeping an eye on those. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes that easy. But with all of that said, Marty, Liz, Lou, I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you, young Will, and Happy New Year. I'm Martin Duffy, a longtime master of whiskey. Mike, don't be intimidated by that. I'm a former national brand ambassador for Benedictine, 8 years as the... 8 years as the co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, and for the last 6.5 years, the sole North American brand representative for Glencairn Crystal. So thus the Crystal King of Chicago. Thank you very much. The Crystal King actually doesn't have a glass.
Like the cobbler's children.
It's over there. Lizard?
Hey everyone, happy 2021. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. I have just over a decade of experience across alcoholic beverage, spanning from beer, vodka, rum, but my particular expertise and favorite is whiskey, of course. So I spent most of my career at Diageo, but now I'm currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you want to learn more about that, in the About the Host section, there's a little link to my website, so check it out. Over to Lou.
Thank you, Liz. Happy New Year. I am Lou Bryson, a whiskey writer. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, and I will take that opportunity. I always let people know what I'm drinking. Today, I'm actually drinking Whiskey Advocate's #1 whiskey for the year, the Larceny Barrel Proof B520. Haven't tasted it yet. Looking forward to it. Yeah. This is what I have right now. My latest book, Whiskey Masterclass. Thank you, Liz, Marty.
Classic.
The classic tasting whiskey. So I'm promoting that and talking about that in various places. And I am also a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast website, which has been very good for me. Thank you much. And back to Marty. Let's kick this thing off.
Sweet! Oh, 2021, you smell so good. First off, I wanted to mention this before we get started. Mike and Matt Blum out of the beautiful Blum Brother Distillery in Galena actually now have a Tuesday afternoon routine with their staff where they order a platter of tacos and sit in front of their flat screen TV set, which is kind of a Galena version of a Jumbotron. And watch A Sip of Knowledge.
Wow.
So, a little shout out to this guy.
Hi,
everyone.
Hey, Blums.
And
those guys.
And we've got Charles Tower all the way from Massachusetts. We have Andrew Weber down in Nashville. Robert Kosiba over in Dublin. Miller just attracts them from all over the place.
My buddy Frank Patino. They're in Chicago.
Frank Patino.
Hey, Frank.
And actually a slew of others. They keep on listing.
Yeah. Everybody wants in on the Miller.
In fact, I have to say, when we started posting about this show, Michael, the response was huge. I mean, people were going, "Oh my God, Miller! Oh my God, Miller! Mike Miller!" It says that. Well, I guess they're having Miller withdrawal over this past year. So, this man,
a more awkward term was never expressed.
Oh, I guess so. All right. No, it's all right.
No.
Think clean thoughts. So this man has started a bar 27 years ago that just last year was voted best whiskey bar in America, best international whiskey bar, and he himself was inducted to Whiskey Magazine's Whiskey Hall of Fame. He is a staple here in Chicago, though originally from Buffalo. You have joined the ranks of Mike Ditka and Al Capone. You're coming from somewhere else, but Chicago has claimed you as theirs. So he's the one, he's the only, he's the man who's never short of something to say, Mr. Mike Miller.
First of all, I would like to give a big shout out to anybody that's out there flying their Delilah's colors today. So thank you for showing your Delilah's spirit with your wearables. Yeah.
My shirts don't fit anymore.
That's a good one.
I notice even you have your little Chicago hat on, Lou.
I do have the Chicago hat on.
Flag, yeah.
Good. I've got a barrel stave.
Woo!
Amazing.
This happens to be here. Little recipe.
Okay.
I've been doing some show and tell here on the virtuality.
Virtuality.
So, hello everyone. I think I have Miller withdrawal. And we're ready to get the tavern back open. It's funny. You said everyone's a little Miller. On Christmas Day, one thing we weren't able to realize this year, but on Christmas Day every year, everyone who comes to the bar gets a Miller High Life split, aka a pony. Therefore, everyone gets a pony for Christmas.
Amazing.
That's right.
Nice. Which I always thought was kind of a fun thing. Everybody walks in the door, immediately is handed a pony, so everybody gets a pony for Christmas.
This whole COVID thing actually stopped an amazing tradition that was for about 26 and a half years. You never closed any day of the week. Is that correct?
That's correct. We were open for 9,729 straight days. But who's counting?
Yeah, right. Who's counting?
But from my perspective, this is something that's out of our control, and it's out of the control of the 7 billion other humans on the planet. And as I say all the time, man, I'm tired of this, just like the other 7 or 8 billion other humans on the planet. But the way I kind of look at it is, at some point, Delilah's will open again, and we will get back to entertaining everyone and having a good time drinking and DJing here. And when we kick it back off again, in my mind, it's just, okay, we'll be open for 9,730 days. If straight got interrupted by a year, not my fault.
Well, Mike, why don't we talk about this? For if there's anybody out there watching who hasn't heard of Delilah's or yourself, why don't we give a little recap of how you got started in the liquor industry and then the birth of Delilah's? Because that's actually
I have not heard the origin story.
Talk amongst yourselves for a moment, because I'm going to get a different whiskey real quick, so that I can answer your question properly.
He's walking away from his own introduction. All right. Well, I can tell you this. I know that Miller used to work at what was the bar? There was a bar in Lincoln Park that he used to bartend at, and then one day the Delilah's used to be called the Crash Palace, which was a punk bar, which makes kind of sense. And then Miller and some partners took it over. And Delilah, I believe, is that someone's grandmother's name? Maybe like one of the partners' mothers or grandmothers. He can confirm all this.
I'm back.
There he's back. All right. Well, so, Mikey, when you were you bartending before you moved to Chicago, and when did you move to Chicago?
I bartended at a place called Angel Ann's. It was a dark pub in Tonawanda, New York. Other than home brewing and buying beer in Canada, I had no professional legal connection to the alcohol industry. When I was a kid, my parents made wine. So on the weekends in the fall, we'd go pick grapes and make wine. So we had when I was about 17, I read World Guide to Beer by the greatest Michael Jackson, influence of, at that point, the most important influence of my life, other than my parents and the alcohol making that we were doing at home, it was Jackson. In 1984, getting homebrew supplies, there was no brew and grow. It was a lot more complicated. But if you have carboys in the basement and you have hydrometers and you have all of the gear to make wine, you functionally have all the gear to make beer. So we would get malt extract and hop pellets, and we learned how to make beer.
So you say we were your parents in on that, or they just
a couple of my buddies.
Okay,
a couple other people who were driving to Canada with me. Buffalo, from Tonawanda to Fort Erie, Ontario, was about 15 minutes. So when we were 19, we could go over the Peace Bridge, buy 2 cases of beer legally, bring them back into America legally, just not drink them legally once we got them home. But, what you do in the privacy of your own home is the privacy of your own home. There was no funnel. So we, the 2 days after my 21st birthday, I walked into Angel Ann's at the top of our street and asked the guy for a job. He hired me. And it's funny because he hired me with the caveat that I would also help in the kitchen, which really wasn't my sort of interest, but I did, where I learned how to properly make chicken wings. I'm sure you're surprised.
Really? There? No way. That's amazing.
But at Gamekeepers, I taught the guys to make chicken wings because they were doing them improperly.
Oh.
You drop them frozen, baby, quintessentially frozen, if you will, and that's the best. That's how you make. That's the buffalo.
Hey, what years were you working at Gamekeepers?
I worked there functionally for a year, so 91 through 92. But Gamekeepers, two of the managers there opened Angel Ann's in the Ukrainian village. So I was at one point working at Gamekeepers and Angel Ann's, and then pretty much transitioned over to Angel Ann's, just kind of arty little bar. I moved into that neighborhood, and then Sweet Alice.
Sweet Alice.
Right. Said Angel Ann's again. Angel Ann's. So Angel Ann's was a start pub in Tonawanda, and I got my start there. And this guy Jack, he turned like just kind of a regular kind of towny bar into this kind of British themed dart pub, and we had dart nights all the time. And on Saturday afternoons, when there were 3 people, you were the 4th person. So threw a lot of dart. And we had Watney's Red Barrel on tap, and that was very unusual for 1987 or whatever it was.
We had that at our wedding.
There you go. You understand.
The Red Lion used to have Watney's all the time. I used to drink that in college.
So, I moved to Chicago to go to grad school. So I went to DePaul, and I lived in Oak Park, and I worked at, yes, Marty, the Wine Cellar.
Wow, you?
So I worked at the Wine Cellar, and I am part of the much heralded Fired at the Wine Cellar Club. And that's why we have the ex-Wine Cellar Christmas party at Delilah's for the last 20 years to celebrate everyone who had been fired by the person who owned the Wine Cellar.
You being fired from the Wine Cellar makes more sense than you working at the Wine Cellar.
Oh, it's a badge of honor.
Yeah,
he fired some small time guys, like he fired Nick Floyd. He fired just a little brand called Three Floyds. He fired Jimmy O'Connor. He runs Bells for America. He fired. At one point, every single commercial. I brewed there and bartended there, and at one point, every single commercial brewer in the Chicagoland area had been fired by that guy.
Like a rite of
Everyone got fired. Like if you got too important, he fired you. He's the opposite of every single business owner in the history of the business.
That was awesome.
He fired everyone. And I was very naive then, because I thought, when you're fighting the good fight, we were all on the same side, And I walked into the Wine Cellar again. I came here to scout schools, and my cousin took me in there. He's like, dude, you're going to love this bar. Brew pub. They had 500 beers, way ahead of their time. It's kind of like German-themed place. And I walked in. I'm like, this is perfect for me, right? It was near where I lived. I didn't know anyone here then. It was just about studying and working at the bar. I recommend anyone who wants to do much better in school, and that is to leave home and go somewhere where you know no one, and you will be better in school if you only are studying. Anyways, so I worked at the wine cellar, and but I should have known, because I walked in the door, again, a couple of days after I lived in Chicago, and I pulled the help wanted sign out of the window, and the owner was standing behind the counter. He also was selling like his beer to go. They were bottling 750s on site and selling them to go. And I walked up and I'm like, I'm your guy. No resume. I'm like, these are my credentials. I was 23. And he hired me and put the sign back in the window. It was the dirtiest help wanted sign you could have ever seen. It was always in the damn window. And I went way out of my way for this guy and did everything that I could to help. And if I wasn't in class, I was there brewing or helping him with whatever. And we went through 7 chefs in 9 months that I was there.
Oh my God.
We were on the 5th manager, but in the 9 months that I was there. I asked the 4th manager to not steal in front of me, because I didn't want to know that he was stealing. And he said, I'll split it with you. And I'm like, just don't let us see you. Just don't let the other staff. Like, it was outrageous, because they all knew they were going to get fired. And so it was this weird dynamic. Like, the older people who worked there, they knew right away they weren't going to last long. So they immediately became bad employees. Like, it's so bizarre.
Wow.
And again, because I had worked at the bar in Buffalo in the kitchen a little bit, Udo, after the 7th chef left in 9 months, he asked if anybody on the staff had any kitchen experience, and I foolishly said yes, I did. And I told the guy right away, I'm like, I'll help you in the kitchen, but I can't run your kitchen. So, I mean, I can drop the fries, but you need to find a new guy, and I'll help you if I'm not supposed to be bartending or if I don't have a class. And I helped him a couple of times, and then he said, can I help in the kitchen tomorrow night? And I said, no, I have a class. I can't do it. The following day, the latest manager fired me because I didn't go in and help in the kitchen the night before. And Paul called me, and he said, Mike, I have to let you go on a phone call. The guy had worked there for like a week. And I said, Paul, you're firing me? You don't know what you're doing. He goes, that's true. I don't know what I'm doing. He told me to call you and fire you today, and I'm really sorry, but that's what I have to do. And so I didn't see that coming, because why would I have seen that coming? So it kind of left me a little in the lurch there, right? I'm going to school, using the money I'm making to pay my rent, and right, like young grad school students were doing. And in a very tenuous manner, a friend of a friend got me an interview at Gamekeepers. I had never been there. It was in, Lincoln Park, where DePaul was. Even though go Bills, Super Bowl, we're only so sport minded. So I walked in the door there at the appointed time. I was supposed to meet with one of the managers for my interview. And I walked in, and they seemed unprepared for my arrival. And so I was waiting around. The office is in the basement. Gamekeepers is gone, unfortunately. Shocking. We'll get into Chicago later, the tavern world, Savior Tavern. And I was sitting upstairs, and someone else came in, and they're like, can I help you? And I said, well, I'm here for an interview with so-and-so. And they're like, okay. And they went down to the office, and I could hear that person say, hey, there's a guy upstairs. He's supposed to have an interview with, this person. And I heard him say, will he be a bar back? Because I was there to get a job as a bartender. And they yelled up the stairs, will you be a bar back? And I'm like, whatever, man. I'll do whatever. At that point, you don't have any connections. You'll take whatever kind of gig you can get. And so they hired me to be a bar back. I was a bar back for a few months. And then at one point I was the bar back and the manager. And then I didn't really want to be management at that point. I just wanted to, go to school. And but I figured I wouldn't bar back much longer if I was carrying the keys and being one of the managers, which was definitely the case. But I trained all the bar backs. I trained Jason He owns Ravens. I trained Joe Kenny. He owned Finley Dunn's for a long time. We would always joke, like, that the greatest bar owners in Chicago had been barbacks at gamekeepers. Because if you can be a great barback, you can be a great bar owner. But if you're a bar owner and you can't barback, you're always reliant on someone else to be the barback, right? If you can't change a keg, you can't get a bucket of ice, you're always reliant on someone else. So I worked at Gamekeepers and I shifted over to Sweet Alice in the Ukrainian Village. And then there were 4 people who owned Sweet Alice, and 2 guys bought the other 2 guys out. And the 2 people I was more associated with took the buyout with the idea that everyone was just going to keep working there. And the other 2 guys, the day after the deal closed, they fired everyone.
Wow.
On the staff. And they were convinced that everyone that was staying there, and I lived next door at that point, they were convinced that everyone that was staying there was a conspiracy against them, that these other guys were going to open a bar up the street and we were going to keep working for them. And then once that other bar opened, we were going to move over and steal all the customers and work there. And I got a call from that guy, and I was like, look, man, I'm just trying to pay my tuition. I have nothing to do with your drama. And he told me I was too important to take a chance on, and that he, went along with it. He fired all of us, and that bar never opened again. Never opened again.
Did you say
opened again.
You were too important to take a chance on?
Too valuable to take a chance on. In other words, I think he was saying that I was too valuable to his business, that if I was actually going to stay there and then go shift over, that it would so crush their business. Because I lived next door. I was there all the time. I worked whatever shift again that I wasn't in school. I was there working there. And I was again in the situation where, like, what's wrong with you people? You're firing the most important people. What's going on? So I filled in some shifts at some friends' bars at that point, and then the 2 guys I had been working with at Sweet Alice and a guy that I had been working with at Gamekeepers approached me about going in on a bar that had gone out of business in a building that had been a bar for a long time, that was definitely in need of repair. And I thought, well, I was basically running somebody else's. At this point, I had graduated from DePaul and got my master's there, and I had started to go to Columbia College to study cinematography. I opted out of law school and went and studied filmmaking instead. And so I was a year into Columbia, and I was like, great, now I'm back in a spot where, I'm trying to pay my tuition and shoot films. So I just figured I was running somebody else's bar and going to school. I could run my own bar and go to school. And so I threw in with these other guys, and on a very shoestring budget, that's right, I'm not naming his name, Frank. Who cannot be named, Frank. Sorry, I'm responding to a question or a comment. And so we did. So I threw in with these other guys on an extremely small shoestring budget. We opened what is Delilah's, and so this has been a bar since 1894. It's been a bar the whole time. It was a speakeasy. It was a private club in the 40s. Vince Clark worked at the Green Mill for a long time. Vince is long gone now, but I was sitting at the Green Mill in the early days of Delilah's. We used to go to the Green Mill a lot, and I still go to the Green Mill as much as I can. Love Dave, and I was sitting at the Green Mill, and this guy Vince, who was just such a classic Chicago bartender. He was a Chicago bartender, old school, and he said to me, "I used to own that joint you own now." and I'm like, Vince, I'd known Vince for a little bit. He never said anything about it. I'm like, Vince, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, from 1980 to 1990. I owned it with my brother. It was called Clark's. But a guy got shot and killed there one night. The city made me close the place. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah,
someone has been murdered in my bar.
It was called Clark's and it was on Lincoln?
Sorry, Ghost, because his name was Vince Clark.
There you go.
Sorry, Ghost. I don't talk about the death stories because then the ghosts get angry. They're disturbed and then they bother me, which is disturbing.
Yeah.
And so we opened Delilah's. Yeah, I was with 3 guys I had worked with before. And then we a few years in, my thought was I'll do this until I finish school, and then someone else can run the bar, and I'll go shoot movies. And then we had opened another place called Sazerac, and it was Chicago's first kind of classic cocktail gastropub. It was in Wrigleyville. It was in 1996.
You were part of that, Mike?
It was my baby. It was my
I remember going there, yeah.
Sazerac, And the Sazerac, Mark Brown was gave us his kudos to use the name. They had trademarked it. It was kind of hard to trademark something like that. So we called it Sazerac, and we were making classic cocktails back in 1996. We had this cool gastropub, and these beautiful murals painted inside the place at Sheffield and School, and it still exists as a bar. I think it actually just went out of business again, but we had a cool thing going there. But my partners that I had been in with for a few years, they started to grow weary of the Delilah's sort of way. I think that they were leaned a little bit more, how can we appeal to the most number of people? And my concept is a little more, how do I appeal to Mike Miller? And I just think if you're running the ultimate bar for yourself and you're true to your school, then you'll either make it on that and you find other people who are into what you're into, or you won't make it. And that's, I'd rather go in that direction. I'd rather do what I believe in. Like I said to all of you earlier, when I'm out of town, I'm Googling rock and roll bars. I'm Googling beer places, whiskey places, and, kind of arty places, right? I'm looking for my bar functionally everywhere I go, or some semblance of those elements.
Yeah.
And, Delilah's will always be a school bar. I always say booze school 7 nights a week. And because we're here to expose what other people are into, whether it's the different DJs. Chuck Wren from Jump Up Records has been spinning here for 27 years. Guy owns a label, his radio show. He knows his genre better than anybody. You want to learn about what he's into, show up on his night, and you can learn from that guy. If you want to come in and talk with me about whiskey or any kind of booze or beer, whatever, that's what my staff does. We're here to show you a good time, but also answer your questions, talk to you about what we do.
So how close was that when you opened? Was that the idea from the get-go?
I think it's more of an ideological perspective, Lou. It opened as this kind of dark little rock and roll bar. I found a flyer recently that said from the first year, and it said 150 beers and 150 whiskeys, and that was 1993. And when we opened this bar, part of it is, I'm a beer guy first and foremost, because that's from the home brewing thing through.
Like Lou.
But when we opened this bar, there's no basement. The infrastructure was very old, and so there was no walk-in. There was no walk-in cooler. There was no draft system. The back door of the bar was outside, and it was drafty, and it was Bondo duct tape and chewing gum kept the place together for the first 5 years. So when anyways, I did this business with these other guys, and we weren't really getting along so well anymore. They wanted to do, like I said, things that were a little more in their mind. They just wanted to conceptually think what will appeal to the most number of people, and that's what they wanted to do. And I'm not being arrogant about it. I can't run that kind of thing. It's just not. I'm not interested.
So, Mike,
and, I didn't set out to run a tavern for a quarter of a century, but it allows me to pursue the things I'm interested in and apply them to my business. And that's, for me, worth more than money.
So, Mike, you had 153 whiskeys in your first year, and that was 1993. Which
yeah,
bourbon was just kind of making its comeback right about then. Scotch too, so at least single malts were on the beginning to rise. So, were you already into that? Were you planning on saying, "Hey, we have the best selection," or was that just some, "Hey, I love whiskey, I'm putting it on the back bar"?
Well, Artie, I'm never about best. We compete with ourselves. Michael Jackson told me one time, years later, I handed him the list from our sour beer festival. I saw him at Zethos over in Belgium, and I handed him the beer list from that year. And he looked at me and he said, "Show off." And, then had a big chuckle about it. And then I saw him a few days later in London. And we went out for dinner, and he looked me square in the eye, and he said that Delilah's was the most important bar in America.
Wow.
Whoa.
Most important. It's way better than best, Marty.
Yeah,
Right?
well, no, yeah. Hey, I never knew that category was even out there.
Right.
Most important.
Jackson. So, anyways, when we opened at that point, you have to consider like beer is more complicated than whiskey from a dispensing perspective, right?
Yeah.
So every bottle of whiskey, there's our 23rd anniversary that we did with Paul. Every bottle of whiskey is 25 servings, let's say. Okay, so that's a case of beer when it comes to servings per customer and an on-premise standpoint. So to manage 24 servings of beer, that needs refrigeration, that needs refrigeration space, that needs backup space. This takes up this much room on the back bar. So with no draft system, we used to run kegs out of, like, we shotgunned a cooler. We drilled a hole in the side of a cooler and put a keg in it. We would run cold plates for some of the imports. Back those days, Marty, we were pouring some, Guinness off a cold plate, stuff like that. So managing having 150 beers was complicated. But what I learned in the early days of Chicago brewing was we all knew each other. There were like 6 brewers, in the Chicagoland area. So everybody knew each other that was making beer. And once we opened and I was developing the spirits collection, because again, I could have more spirits, but I couldn't have more beer.
Shelf life. I mean, that's huge.
Yep.
Shelf life.
Shelf life's the space.
We could have more spirits. And Chicago at the time also, there's some other considerations that I'm not sure that people completely understand unless you've been doing this for a while in this market, is before there was Binny's, there was Sam's Wines and Spirits. And one of the most influential people in the alcohol industry in general, on or off premise, was Joe Conjusi.
Yeah.
Right. So because of Joe over at Sam's, and then Joe did go over to Binny's, Joe was way ahead of the curve when it came to putting out single casks for the liquor store. Way ahead of the curve. And those bottles at Sam's, he had Dave O'Tay's, man. If it said hand selected by Joe C on the label, people were waiting for those to get to the store. And to this day, if you look at the back of a bottle of Eagle Rare, in the lower corner, it says Joe C on every bottle. So the first barrel we ever picked out was a barrel of Blanton's in 1999 with Joe C and Elmer T. Lee. It was a big day.
Wow.
And so, but my point is that in those days, in the early 90s, if 20 cases of something came to the market, 19 went to Sam's and 1 came here because no one cared. And
yeah.
I'm not saying no one cared,
No, it's true.
Other businesses cared, but it was good for Sam's for there to be some off premise. Like, it was a different kind of world. Like, they recognized that it was a good place. If people could go and sample it somewhere, better for them. Not everybody agrees with that concept anymore, the build it on premise and sell it off premise. Some people have lost that perspective. But for me, my relationship with Joe meant that we could develop this symbiotic relationship. But what it also meant was booze came to Chicago for Joe. Scotch, especially broker Scotch, came to Chicago for Joe. And so it gave me access to things that were coming for Sam's that weren't going to other markets, or certain, because of that one person in that one store. So it gave me access to additional things. I also, but here's the thing. You all know me long enough. We're relationship buyers. This is a community sensibility business. And just like knowing all the brewers in the early days, it didn't take that long of being open and having this, as I always say, Marty, to kind of answer your question, Delilah's is not a whiskey bar. Delilah's is a bar that has a lot of whiskey. But as I started to taste more things and meet more of the people involved, I've always gravitated a little more towards brown spirits. And as I started to meet more of the people from both Scotland and Kentucky, a little bit from Ireland, I just started to become friends with those people, beyond my interest in what they were producing. We just, you've been here, Marty, with plenty of boys over from Elgin, and they're like, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but I like it. So think about 1995, you come over from Scotland and they're taking you to steakhouse after steakhouse, and then they roll you into here and they're like, yeah, right? Because
your place, Mike, ended up when Whiskey Fest first started coming to Chicago. There was only really 2 whiskey bars at that time. There was the Duke of Perth, which is primarily just single malt Scotch, and then there was your bar, which had a much wider representation, and so that became the after party after Whiskey Fest. And you would see a Fred No hanging out with a Richard Patterson and Ian Miller and all these other guys. It was the weirdest menagerie of whiskey people from all over the world in one little Chicago bar.
Well, and Marty, I'll give a shout out to Mitch over at Twisted Spoke. He was definitely ahead of the curve as far as whiskey went too. He was putting out single barrels with Julian in the mid '90s as well. But the fun thing about that was that those people we were hanging out, those luminaries you were just discussing, but they weren't in here to talk whiskey with each other. They were here to hang out.
Yeah,
and have a good time. And what we would always promote for those kinds of events when Whiskey Fest first started, and I met John and Amy, and they were all in favor of this happening, is we weren't really promoting. We were promoting the bar to the customers at Whiskey Fest, but we were not promoting come to the bar after, mainly because they probably had enough at that point. Let's be realistic. We were promoting it to the people who were working the event because they could stand next to each other at a table, but they didn't really have that much of an opportunity to gather. And if it wasn't for our encouraging those people to come to Delilah's after, then they would have gone out maybe, but they would have gone out to disparate places and not had an opportunity to interact with each other. And that's really what it boiled down to, was their opportunity to interact. And I mean, some of those nights, there are some legendary things that went down here that I can't completely talk about. But if you've ever heard George Grant talk about checking into the Hyatt with his certificate of completion of the Slinger from the Diner Grill, that's pretty.
Tell that story. That's a good one.
Well, the Diner Grill is this old single counter diner on Irving Park that we would go to all the time. And I just thought it would be entertaining if, there were like 8 dudes in kilts sitting at the counter at 3 a.m. or whatever. And it just was a place we really liked. And we always would take people from out of town there. And I just thought that the whiskey crew that wanted to go out for something to eat would enjoy a very Chicago experience, a diner, like that kind of diner, old school. And so we went there and we took the whole counter, all whiskey folks sitting at the counter. And we don't want to talk about the people who normally hung out there and sound derogatory, but they were amused themselves by our crew. And so I ordered everyone a Slinger. And a Slinger is a bed of hash browns, a plate of hash browns with 2 cheeseburger patties, smothered in chili.
Oh gosh.
And if you finished it, you got a certificate of completion.
That certificate is a little boy on the toilet, or a guy getting his heart checked by a doctor.
It said it was a certificate of completion. It said that the certificate of completion for the Diner Grill that you had finished your Slinger.
Signed by the grill chef.
I still have one on my refrigerator at home.
I got 2.
It was a badge of honor. In the same night, Marty. In the same night. So it was just a funny thing, and so George finished his Slinger. Everyone finished their Slinger. But George finished his Slinger, and we all got our certificates of completion of eating the Slinger. So based on a certain set of criteria of George getting to the airport and getting to the hotel, he didn't have his luggage or anything with him because the people that he had been with at the fest, they got his stuff to his room. So he got to the Hyatt. He not only had no luggage, but he had no identification whatsoever.
Oh my God.
It was all in his bags in the room. They had checked him into the room, but the Hyatt had no record of him.
Oh,
And
God.
so the person, he told me that the person at the Hyatt at like 5 o'clock in the morning, they said, Mr. Grant, how can we check you into your room? You don't have any bags. You don't have any identification. And out of his jacket pocket, he pulled out his certificate of completion of the slinger. And it says right here, George Grant. And they checked him into the Hyatt with his certificate of completion of the slinger.
Crazy, George. Actually, Will, I don't know if you saw the photos I sent you, but the other tradition that was pretty common in those days where everybody gathered behind the bar at Delilah's. And it was, depending on the night, it was a virtual who's who. You
Yeah.
got those, Will, by chance? Can you bring one up?
In those early days, again, everybody wants to be a whiskey bar now. And when we opened, like I said, without seeming snooty about it, I've always said we're not a whiskey bar. We're a bar that has a lot of whiskey. Not that I don't appreciate all of the accolades for being a great whiskey bar. We are a great place to drink whiskey. 100%. We are worthy of our international recognition. But the reason I say that is because pre the Yelp, you didn't have to be categorized by someone else. So people call us a dive bar. I'm like, we're not a dive bar. You can poop here. There's no mop in the fucking corner. Excuse me.
You can't poop at dive bars?
In my world, in my old world, I love a good dive bar, but I connote dive bar in a certain manner. And a dive bar is a cool bar that has fallen slightly into disrepair, right? I mean, that's what we would assume to be kind of a dive bar, like soft spot in the floor, questionable bathroom facilities, don't drink the draft beer, but now dive bar is a different thing. Now dive bar is dive bar is as edgy and old school. But because nice. But because now everyone has to be categorized. When Delilah's opened, there were three kinds of look at that. Did I ever sing you any of the sea shanties that I wrote with Nick Morgan and Dave Broom when we were
Oh my God.
On the
Scotland?
classic malt cruise?
Ask Nick and Dave sometime about the Blue Seagull.
We may have Nick on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'll pop by. And there was the one year that Julian Van Winkle, our after party promotion was that Julian would make everyone an old fashioned. And we had 2 bottles of when we could buy cases and cases of Van Winkle. We put out a Delilah's custom label Van Winkle for our 10th anniversary, and a bottle just sold in London for $8,000. And I bid up to like 3, and I dropped out. I'm like, damn, And Julian stood at the bar and made 50 old fashions.
Wow.
And there was a line out to the street through the bar to get an old fashioned from Julian. And at the end, he's like, man, we're never doing that again, man. Because for years, Julian and Preston would guest bartend. After Whiskey Fest. But after that year, Preston did it again. But Julian was like, no way, man, I'm out. Because his hands were sore from muddling.
Sure.
But see, now, even though, all right, say you don't, the thing is as bars start to progress, as popularity of whiskey started to progress, you did get categorized as a whiskey bar. You were voted best whiskey bar in America.
But Marty, I'm saying I appreciate those accolades.
Right.
It's just there's a certain give me 1 second. There's a certain it's a little bit about the semantics for me because of the categorization thing. In like I was going to say, in the early days when I opened Delilah's, there were 6,000 taverns in Chicago, and now there's like 1,200. And the previous 2 administrations ago went out of its way to shut taverns down, eliminate taverns. But in those days, there was a Chicago model. And if you worked at a bar and you wanted to own your own place, there was that opportunity. You wanted to own a robot bar, you go open your damn robot bar. You know, you could conceptualize whatever you wanted to, because there were enough places that would just close and you could sign a lease and get a new tavern license and open up again. And that model is gone now, unfortunately. So when we opened, there were 3 kinds of bars in Chicago. There were sports bars, and to be a sports bar, like Gamekeepers, you had to have giant satellite dishes. There was no direct TV.
And
Not
green laminated bars too. They always seem laminated tops bar.
Well, but that fits into category number 2. So you were a dedicated sports bar. You were a dedicated sports bar. No gray area there. Number 2, we're just kind of like, you know, old man kind of mom and pop neighborhood places. And, you know, everybody had a bottle of VO, and we sold, you know, Sambuca all the time. And, you know, the status quo brands. And that was the majority of taverns in Chicago were just a neighborhood and a regular joints. And that's what gave Chicago, that's why Chicago was so great when I moved here from a tavern perspective, because there were just so many fun little neighborhood taverns. And it was about the customers more than it was about the selection. It was about its atmosphere. Because selection wasn't a thing, is not what people put their attention to. The other category were idiosyncratic, kind of arty little bars like Delilah's and the Artful Dodger and Augenblick and the Intertown Pub and Sweet Alice. And so that was it. That was sports bars, neighborhood joints, or kind of arty little bars. But at that point, in those days, and this is what I'm saying to you, that this bar was Mike's bar. It was not a whiskey bar or a beer bar or anything else. This was Mike's bar. And this was reflective of what I wanted to put out to the world. This was my canvas to the world. And so sometimes maybe I just push back to on the categories.
And I wasn't putting it back in that category, but let me finish my original thought, Mike.
Before you forget,
these bars, a whole category did begin of whiskey bars. You saw that here in this city, in every other city. I mean, here you started getting Untitled, even what's the bar in the Hotel Polymer, Sable, and everybody wanted to have the biggest whiskey selection. Even Mitch at Twisted Spoke really expanded his selection when they redid the inside there. Everyone started doing it. However, your bar still had a lot of gravitas. It still had the and as Mike Veach just put, you know, there's more to just having a lot of whiskey to make it a whiskey bar. You need staff. And for the longest time, it seemed like your staff I thought they were chained behind the bar because they just never left. They were there forever. I must have been about 12.
Chaining going on, Marty, but we don't get into that.
12 or 15 years, you had predominantly the same staff.
Michael Connell's been here for 27 years.
Yeah, Jesus, the whole time.
Wow. Mary Darrow's been here for 26 years.
You know, which is amazing. And it's made your bar a destination place above a lot of other bars, because you will walk in and you will see what we used to refer to as a slacker having his
they became hipsters.
Then they became hipsters.
Then they moved to Logan Square,
having whatever your beer and whiskey special is that night. And then you'll see some guys in suits coming in because they heard that you have this behind the bar, and I want to, pay the higher dollar for that particular dram. I mean, that's what makes the bar fun, in my opinion, is that there's a really eclectic mix of people who travel.
What makes us, again, I don't want to overstate it. It's just, there was at one point where you could be what you wanted to be. 1993, there was no such thing as a whiskey bar. We were just doing what we wanted to do.
Know.
So it's just more of like, we're a music bar. We're a music bar first. We're about people spinning their records. We're a beer place. I was in film school. We show cinema here. We don't, that's sort of our thing. So it's just this like weird little sensibility that I have that I don't want to be called any one thing. But here's my other point. So many people now say to me, "Oh man, I'm going to open a whiskey bar." And I tell them, don't open a whiskey bar, open a bar and have a great selection of whiskey and let somebody else call you a whiskey bar. Because if you call yourself a whiskey bar, then you got to compete with me and Bill Thomas and every other joint that's already doing it better than you. And you're going to be considered secondary to all these other places that are doing it better. So have a great selection of spirits and train your staff. You know, it's funny at Whiskey Fest for many years. You know, we move around. I bring the whole staff because it's a great way to train. And I always tell my staff, we don't have to focus on what we don't have. Let's focus on what we do have. Let's drink them together and develop our sensibilities about those whiskeys together. And we would go from table to table, and people would basically be like, damn it, the Delilah's crowd's there. You know, like we'd have like 8 or 10 people moving around the room at Whiskey Fest. But that's why my staff is so well trained, because we sample together, we go to the events together, we have mandatory reading. And that's it. That's why I tell people, like, do what you want to do. And if you want to have a lot of whiskey, do it. But don't call yourself something that you immediately won't be as good at as somebody else who's already doing that. So that's why I love when someone says that we're a great whiskey bar. But we would never say that, because we would never say we're the best. But I know like plenty of places in Chicago that will go nameless who told sales reps when they opened, we just want to have more than Delilah.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And I'm like, this is 1894 wooden building. It was not designed for what I'm using it for. And so we're capped. We can only have so much. Yeah. So I'd rather have a great selection. You know, once you get above a couple of hundred, once you get past 500 whiskeys, it becomes more of a personal selection than it becomes about how many. For me, you know, I always tip my hat to Bill, you know, at Jack Rose. We're good friends, and we've put out releases together. We're working on, though it's a secret, we're working on custom brands that are available just at our bars and just on premise, stuff like that. So I don't really look at these other places as my competition. You know, Bill and I might joke around about, you know, oh, I won best, you know, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really what it's about. Bill's bar was designed. It was built and designed to, Jack Rose was built and designed to be that place. And so you give him kudos because he has realized an unbelievable business based on a concept. Like, he brings it to the table better than anybody brings it to the table. My bar's different. My bar's about coming in and listening to Pete Nathan spin old R&B 7 inches and picking through our cool whiskey list. You know, 80% of the things that we carry are no longer available. So no one's had everything we have. So just on that, you know, how many do you need? So then we kind of joke that if you look on the Scotch part, we have as many pages for Highlands as we do for Islands. So why there's so many more distilleries in the Highlands? Why would we have an almost equal number from island distilleries? That's just sort of my lean, you know. So if that's the way I kind of see things, then that's the way it's going to be reflected in my bar. If we could have 2,000 whiskeys, would I have 2,000 whiskeys? I don't know. Maybe I'd have more rum. You know, maybe we'd have more other spirits that I'm interested in. We've transitioned the upstairs bar to some degree into the exotic spirits bar. So we have our mezcal collection and more of our rum collection upstairs. So, you know, if you want to really dig into whiskey, do it downstairs. And if you want to get into some of the more esoteric and exotic spirits, come upstairs. So, you know, I've always tried to squeeze every bottle in I can. Now, we did rebuild the back bar after years and years of talking about it during this break period. And the back bar now holds 5 additional cases of Scotch.
Whoa! You know, you have been talking about this for about 15 years.
Well, you know, we've always built it above. Hey, hold that thought. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay. So we have several questions come through, and I think we also wanted to get into some of what, you know, Mike's doing right now. So when he comes back, we'll get into that.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Mike has been doing a lot of online stuff, and he not only with whiskey but with wine. And I know he wants to talk about both of those. I believe that's the upstairs bar there, and we lost Lou. Did we lose Lou, or did he just become a little round white circle? That's very odd. Yeah, so we're going to get to Gerald. We got your question and yours too, Eric. We'll get those in. We are running low on time, Mr. Miller. If you want, I can just do my mic. Hi, Marty.
I'm back.
I'm doing
Hey.
I'm filling in for you, Mike. Yeah, Liz has a couple of questions.
Whatever Marty said, it's not true.
We're running low on time, Mike. So Liz has a couple of questions for you.
All right, we have some questions from some audience members, and then also we can kind of quickly touch base on what you have going on right now as well.
You got to give me a second, Liz. This is Diane.
Sorry about that. I had to let the dog out.
Whoa, is that a euphemism?
I am. I'm
No.
oh, can you wait for me for 5 minutes?
I gotta go walk the dog. Excuse me. Miller?
If you're involved in our whiskey tasting, on top of the whiskeys that come to you in the mail.
Wait, what?
you get
Wait. Go ahead, Liz.
Liz, go.
A question from Gerald O'Kinner asks, "Hi, Mike. How do you find out about interesting spirits to carry when you started out and everyone else had the same background?"
Well, is that from Gerald O'Kinard?
Yes.
Indeed.
Interesting. So in the early days of Delilah's, beyond maybe sales rep showing me stuff, I was a judge at the Beverage Testing Institute as of the mid-90s. And I would taste things there all the time. And when I found stuff that I liked, then I would apply it to the bar. That is absolutely a big factor of how we pursued things. You know, one of the things that we're doing right now, if I can just throw this in there, is we're hosting, I'm a little funny about the virtual experience, but at the same time, I have this perspective of, can we offer a virtual experience that we couldn't necessarily offer live, which obviously we would prefer to do. So next weekend, we're meeting with our boy Dan Kroll and Cameron George and Lindsey Johnson and Colin over on Isla at Ardbeg for his first public event as distillery manager. And we're offering a collection of extremely rare and extinct Ardbegs and Glenmorangis. And people can order those and pick them up, or I send them to them. And they can participate. They're pretty limited number of people, but they can participate with sampling these rare whiskeys and talking to the people who represent those whiskeys. The following Friday, we have Fred No on the call talking about some extinct Basil Hayden Knob Creek with some of the new stuff. And so we'll have Fred on the call for a couple hours, telling stories and having some fun. And can I have Fred at the bar at my beck and call and have 35 people crowd around him and hear everything that he says? No, we can't. You know, you have to come with me and sit in his backyard. That's not going to happen. So we've got Bill Samuels coming up, and we're going to have some whiskeys that are just not available. We have John Glacier coming on with Compass Box, and we're going to talk about how we developed the brands that we put out together and taste those whiskeys. And we have some other things that I haven't announced yet. I haven't announced those two tastings yet. And we're going to give people an opportunity to meet some of our favorite people that are in those pictures and taste whiskeys that they can't go to the store and buy. And so in those cases, I'm for it. So if people are interested in participating in those kinds of tastings, look at our social media. And every 2 weeks on a Monday, we'll release dates for additional upcoming tastings. And they cap out at about 35 or 40 people. So the first two tastings with Ardbeg Glenmorangie and with Fred No are already sold out. And we put them for sale on Monday of last week. So people are enthusiastic. People want to help. And people want to participate. You know, again, this is our community. If we can bring them all together and sample together and try some things, then that's a good thing. And if it leads us to be able to, we still have to pay the rent and we have to pay back our third, fourth, and fifth mortgages. So the Small Business Administration, at some point, they're going to want their money. And as Shelly says, stay ahead of the pain, baby. So if we can generate some dollars and put forth some unbelievable experiences for people, you know, if we can be talking to a distiller in Japan, it's the following day for them. I can't be like, hey, can you pop over from Cavalon and hang out for the day and talk to us about whiskey, or can you come on a Zoom call for a couple hours and talk about whiskey? So that's what we have coming up. And if people want to participate, just kind of keep an eye on our social media. Keep an eye on our Facebook page.
It's on your Facebook page, Mike?
The events are listed on our website, but they're launched on the Facebook page. They're launched on Twitter. They're launched on Instagram. So people are keeping an eye on those platforms. They'll see the releases as they come out.
And would they be able to get samples outside of Illinois? Can you ship nationwide?
Yes, that's why we worked out our arrangement with some shipping companies so that we can get that all done effectively
Okay.
Go ahead, Liz. I just wanted to throw my little plug in for our whiskey.
No, absolutely. That's what I was going to ask you about anyway, but we do have one last question.
From a former employee.
Eric.
Staff member.
Yes. How do you decide who makes the cut? Which whiskeys make the cut?
Well, kind of like I was saying, we just have this sort of personal approach. I showed you the few. Okay, so we started to work with Jeff Walsh up at Opadon. Really like what he's doing, So his whiskey made the cut, and we started to become friends with that guy. And so this is our 24th anniversary Opadon bottle that we did, and this is an Emily Report painting. So Emily is someone we've shown many times, and she's done several custom Delilah's shows of paintings around Delilah's, and she put out a book called Paintings of Delilah's.
Oh, wow.
And so I said to Emily, I want you to paint me a painting of the back bar that I can turn into a label and put it on a bottle that'll be on the back bar. And this is what she came up with, right? And this bottle of whiskey is spectacular. Single malt, single barrel rye that was aged, finished in a barrel that had Maker's Mark in it for 6 years and Lefroy in it for 10 years. Then two distilleries we affiliate with. And then it came back to America, and we used that barrel to finish this single malt rye in. And it's not like any other thing. So my point about what makes the cut, to Eric's point, is sometimes it's relationship based, but the whiskey has to be great. Sometimes it's, if we're at Whiskey Fest, once we sample together around the room, then everybody's like free for all, taste as much new stuff. And if you go to the Binny's event, which I think rates among World of Whiskeys at Binny's, that has to rate among the best places in the world to taste whiskeys. Best whiskey show. Top 10 best whiskey shows in the world.
Yep.
Inexpensive. They wedge us in the big store. And we taste so many things in that show, which is going to be the day before Whiskey Fest. We're going to focus on things we don't carry or are just coming out but haven't become available to us, more so than the things we already carry. So if we're at the end of the Binny show and we get to the end of the room, we compare notes. And if some of my staffers like, oh, man, that particular, that's where we found the not great packaging, but the Loch Lomond Inchmurin 12-year as part of the Island series, even though it's not from an island. It was very odd. It was a little spendy for its sort of specifics. But man, it was just delicious. And this would have slipped past us. This would have flown under our radar. And we showed that whiskey to so many people, limited edition. It's gone. I think we have a couple bottles left. But it's just a good example of what makes the cut, right?
Yeah.
Deliciousness, that's number one.
Yeah.
Relationships. And then our staff saying, hey, let's check out this one. Because they're also the people that are standing behind the bar and they're showing people. So
right.
My bartenders have their faves, right? They have the things that they really affiliate with, that they recommend to people. And I think that that's equally important. Again, I am a micromanager and I am a relationship buyer. So when there's a new cartridge that comes out, we have 12 kinds of cartridge. You could say, do you really need another cartridge? Both A, I think it's probably going to be delicious, but B, I love John Campbell and I so want to go to an Iron Maiden concert with that guy. And So, those things are important to us. So there are a lot of great whiskeys. There are more great whiskeys than we have shelf space for. So the things that make the cut are always going to be things that we adore and things that are made by our friends and things that we're making ourselves.
And Mike, just so you know, your wife, Sally, has left the building. She says, gotta go, sorry. But she was surprised that you didn't talk about who really runs the show that allows it all to happen.
She allows all the things to happen that I tell her about.
Hey, something that a lot of folks don't know.
Is she off the call now? Can we talk about the secret room?
No, it's still going. It's still going. Like something that I don't think a lot of folks realize is that when Whiskey Fest started coming to Chicago, you started a series of one. You'd start off that say Whiskey Fest was on Friday, you'd start on Monday doing your Whiskeys of the World education. Then you'd invite different brands, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, to come into the bar, have different stations and do the thing. And it was the beginning of what would later be known as Whiskey Week.
No,
Whiskey Week.
I think we kind of started Whiskey Week, Marty.
Yeah, I took it outside of Delilah's, but you started it. It really was your nucleus. And it's something that they couldn't duplicate. Other cities tried to duplicate it.
Yeah.
And the guys, Lou would attest back in those days, they'd say, Amy Westlake would say, nobody else does it like Chicago. And really, you could chalk it up to Miller.
New York just seemed to lose focus.
I'll take credit for it, but I'll tell you this. What we also have to contemplate is, again, it still comes back down to what are the relationships. Marty, you participated. Lou got screwed out of participating this year because of the stupid plague.
Yeah.
But Lou and I have done events together. Marty, you participated in events. And I'll always tip my hat to Marty. Still the best representative of whiskeys from a company to date. When Marty was master of whiskey back in the Diageo days, we still carry like 50 Diageo stuff because of Marty from 20 damn years ago. So we can get into that in part 2. But the Mike Journey part 2.
Guys, if you want to donate some, we can get the band to stay for an hour. If you want to just put money in that.
So when we started to do things every night for Whiskey Week, it was still always about who's coming to town. A lot of people would come. It's not so much these days, but people would come to town early in the week and work the market before Whiskey Fest. And then we would find out who those people were. They'd reach out to me and we would schedule tastings. And then it started to evolve in like over the top. Like, as I always say, my job is to scheme up events and then try to pull them off. And, so we held the largest tasting of rye whiskey ever held in the world. It was free. 90 ryes. It was free.
Wow.
And we held the largest tasting of Irish whiskey ever held in the United States. We were about to realize the first ever tasting of a whiskey made in every state.
Wow.
So free. And so we've come up with these, like, Mary and I will sit in the office. Mary's our director of operations. And we'll sit in the office 6 months out and we'll start to talk about Whiskey Week. Whiskey Week.
Talk about Whiskey Week.
And we'll start coming up with ideas. We did Story of the Barrel, where we tasted what was in the barrel next to the whiskey that was finished in that barrel. We did Totally Bonded and only showed whiskeys that were bottled and bond. So we come up with ideas and then we try to fulfill those ideas to the max. And people, of course, have said to me dozens of times, why don't you charge people for this?
Yeah.
And I always tell them, I'm asking the sales reps to donate their time and maybe, bring a bottle of whiskey to sample out. That's legal. And I'm not going to ask those people to participate and donate their time and be here and support us and donate the whiskey and then charge people to attend. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. And I want to give people the opportunity to learn from us because I think ideally then they're going to come back and hang out with us because they appreciate what we bring to them. It's like a free pony on Christmas.
So we have, we're running short on time, but we have 2 last very quick questions.
Bring it.
So the first one from Tim Kovac says, hi, Mike. With the whole COVID-19 situation, most distribution channels are not taking anything new. www.spiritwater.J.
Spiritwater
ideas that you suggest?
Maybe I'm a little confused by the question, Tim. If you could maybe clarify a little bit. Do you mean distribution channels like the people who I get the whiskey from, or distribution channels as far as the people that the customer would get the whiskey from? So like my companies, the problem for the distributors when it comes to getting whiskey to me is that a lot of my staff, a lot of my business associates for the distributors have been furloughed. And so I'm not really getting the same information about what's landing when it gets in stock. And because the primary business that's been happening in all metropolitan areas has been off premise, the long-term taverns like Delilah's or whiskey associated places or spirits associated places in general, they're not really getting the attention that they're used to. Now I'm hoping for the roaring 2020s. because I've said for a long time, my competition is not other bars. It's not other restaurants. I've never had that perspective. And this is the entertainment business, and we're going to do the best we can every day, and we're going to compete with ourselves. Can we do a better job than we did today, tomorrow? Yeah. So, but my competition and everybody's competition for the last 5 or so years has been the stay-at-home economy. Mm. So though I may use these services too, Netflix and Drizzly and Grubhub and Amazon and Facebook, those are sort of the competition of the on-premise world, the stay-at-home economy, right? It's cheaper to stay at home. You can dial in the sporting event at home. You can tune in hundreds of thousands of movies at home. We all know it's always awkward at home to drink at home. But Oxford did a study about the variable between negative effects of regular alcohol drinking on your body, which you can see has not been a problem for me. And Lou is the picture of health. But the point that the Oxford study was trying to make was it also studied the positive and negative impact on society and people's health by not being as part of society. Mm-hmm. So when people went to taverns, their local tavern, whatever, they ended up being healthier people because they were more a part of society than people who didn't drink or didn't drink out. And I think ultimately, for me, and maybe I'll leave you with that unless you have some more questions, is that, when I was in school, I don't remember learning about the Spanish flu. I remember learning about the end of World War I, and I remember learning about Prohibition. Think about it. 15 years we couldn't have a drink. 15 years. So if we came out of World War I and we came out of a global pandemic and we walked into what we refer to as the Roaring 20s, though it was illegal to have a cocktail, I think that we should all focus on Roaring 2020s. And I think everybody out there tonight and everybody that is in our industry and everybody who's society-minded needs to think about going to your neighborhood tavern.
Oh, my God, I think about it all the time.
Make it through there.
Who dreams about it?
But, flourish. We go Roaring 20s. If you will, balls to the wall.
Yep.
Let's go out, let's interact with each other, and let's support these businesses that have been struggling to exist and may not make it through. And if they make it through, they can't limp their way into finding out whether they're going to even exist after that. Roaring 2020s is what we all have to work towards. And I think we've all seen plenty of, we've all binged enough. We've all ordered booze to be delivered enough. We've all, seen what the stay-at-home economy, if you have no choice, will you choose it? Will you continue to choose it? Or you'll be like, okay, I've had enough, and I just really want to go out.
Yeah, everyone get out. Go out as soon as you can, as soon as they're ready, as soon as Delilah's is open.
I'm shooting for April 1st.
Big party on April Fool's Day.
No, really, we're open.
Everyone, Mike, thanks very much. Obviously, huge interest, and you're never short on words. So we really appreciate you coming on. And the best of luck, man. And everyone check out Mike's social media.
There's a link for those. To the website as well. So
that's going to help us through, and you'll have a great time experiencing those.
Yeah. Synergy. Yeah. And then Liz, who do we have next week?
I don't know. You just announced it on email 5 minutes before the show. So you take it away, Marty. Who do we have?
Oh my God, I sent the invite.
It's your guy. You introduce it.
It's not Mike Miller. It's not Mike Miller Part 2.
It's not Mike Miller. No, I don't know.
The continuing saga.
I can see Mike Miller somehow entering. Just somehow getting in.
We left out 25 years of.
I know.
I'm working for you, so we'll save that. But next week we have on Raymond Davidson,
the inventor of the Glencairn glass and the founder of Glencairn, Little Raymond.
Oh, I'll pop on and say hey to the old man.
Yeah, he'll be joining us, and there's some kind of surprising stuff about Ray, other than inventing the glass, the iconic.
I'll tell you surprising stuff about.
All right. But until then, Happy New Year's, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Can't be any worse than last year.
Happy New
All
Year's,
right.
everyone.
Yeah.
And here's
Thank
the
you, Liz. Liz, always a pleasure. Lou, Marty, good to see you.
Bye, Mike.
Cheers.
And Lou, you win for beard.
No competition, man.
That's right. It's not the best beard. It's the most important one.